Excellent. And we are live and there are people and everything. So I guess I'll start with what inspired me to invite you both here tonight. And it was started with Jacob's tweet where he said, "This may seem like a stupid question, but if there's anyone who's familiar with the research, what is the relationship between MPD and sexual narcissism?" And you replied, as a phenomenon, it's described as a pattern of behavior that includes a lack of empathy for sexual partners, sexual entitlement, demanding sexual standards, performance-driven attitude to sex rather than focusing on pleasure and connection. And it was that last bit of performance-driven attitude to sex rather than focusing on pleasure and connection that made me feel like, oh, that suddenly cut a bit deep and I wasn't ready for that. And oh yeah. And then
it's like, oh great, I'm called out now. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I started realized that everything else on that list of things there, the lack of empathy, the entitlement, the demanding sexual standards, all of that, what we're sort of describing are things that can be fulfilled by pornography. And then suddenly it all seemed to come together in a big gooey ball of, oh, and it seemed quite an interesting thing to at least have a discussion about, even if there's no link to anything really in my head and all of that. It seemed to just be a good, yeah. And like I say, it cut deep suddenly. And I didn't know that it was going to. And so here we are.
So, okay, I want to say something real quick, that I think something that would benefit a lot of the viewers watching this is to make a distinction between narcissistic personality disorder and general narcissism versus sexual narcissism. Because when you hear sexual narcissism, you just kind of think, oh, this is how a narcissist views sex. And like, sure, there's a correlation, but it's a different set of behaviors independent of MPD. And Dr. Ruth, I think you would do a better job than either of us at like explaining what the, like those four characteristics and kind of going into detail with those.
I'll tell you how I see it. I see narcissism. I kind of take Craig Malkin's view on this, that it's a spectrum. You can have not enough narcissism, you can have just the right amount of narcissism, and you can have way too much narcissism. And at the peak of way too much, that's when you tip into narcissistic personality disorder. Does that make sense? So narcissism is the need to feel special.
I disagree, but continue.
You disagree? Well, anyway, that's I guess a helpful way to see it, right? And sexual narcissism, I think, is a manifestation of narcissism. Just like you can have narcissism that focuses on your work performance, you can be the nightmare CEO who's demanding and hostile and performance driven and doesn't give a crap about his employees. You can be the narcissistic romantic partner. It can play out in sex. And it doesn't for everyone. And I think you can have that spectrum in sex. You can have someone who's perhaps quite narcissistic sexually. Maybe they're demanding and performance driven and lack empathy for their partners. But in the rest of their life, they're not so impaired. So you wouldn't say they have narcissistic personality disorder. And for others, it's narcissistic personality disorder, but the way it manifests is sexually. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like sexual self-esteem juice, isn't it? It's like the need to...
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about like kind of something I say sometimes is I think every narcissist kind of has like, they have like a pride point that they really like. Go wrong, you get self-esteem juice from like everything, but they have like their pride point, and in some cases that can be like sexual performance.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or how it was for me is being like sexually promiscuous and stuff like that, being a ladies' man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of self-esteem juice to be had from that. And I think that, you know, as I feel like it's something, sexual performance, sexuality in general is something that we're increasingly putting a lot of emphasis on. And so it's something that you can be narcissistic about. And as I think generally in society, is with people are being a lot more open about stuff and talking about stuff. And that again gives you that opportunity to be narcissistic about that. You can brag about it now a lot more easily, you know, and there are a lot more circles where various sexual activities would be applauded and all of that sort of thing, I think. But it was, as I said, the thing that really brought it to my attention was the sort of I feel like in some way, like those things can be provided by porn, and it seemed to sort of. I don't know if it is actual. I don't know. I'm getting mixed up over what I want to say.
Well, I think sorry to interrupt, but like I think that like what you're kind of saying is like a lot of this does kind of have the there is like this disconnection in sexual intimacy when it comes to sexual narcissism and an inherent objectification of these people. And porn can be the epitome of that because these people literally are just sexual objects from our perspective because that's the only context we even see them in.
Absolutely. It is on demand. It is anything you want on demand. No, but whatever you want to see or experience from a point of view of porn. No, porn isn't going to say, no, I don't feel like doing that tonight or something like that. It is right there as and when you want it. And you are completely detached from it. It's a thing on a screen. It's not a person you have to think about or take into consideration what they feel or anything like that. It's just there. And it seems to tick all of those boxes, even that demanding sexual standards. You're dealing with beautiful people doing things to a professional level. They're all doing it well and that kind of thing. It
well,
ticks
it's a
a lot of
fantasy.
boxes.
Absolutely.
That's a good way to put it.
Ideal
isn't so much of narcissism though. It's just that
yeah.
in this case they've managed to film it.
Yes. But then again, what I would also say is that people in normal, healthy sexual relationships watch porn, and that this isn't the problem here is not the watching porn. It's everything else. It's the lack of intimacy. It's the lack of empathy. It's the disconnect from a real relationship. If that's what you want, that's the issue. And I don't think you can blame porn for that. There are plenty of people in healthy, happy relationships who use porn. And I think that's something David Ley his work really stresses.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I'm not blaming the porn for this.
No, but I think
what I'm feeling is that someone having those problems in those behaviors, it feels like that could easily gravitate somebody towards porn.
I mean, it's like any other like substances, I would say, right? You have an underlying issue, but you're using the substance to cope with those underlying issues.
I'm in no way blaming the porn for this. I don't think it's the fault of that. I think it's the other way around. I think these behaviors are doing that driving, and that's what was the little light bulb on feeling for me, that it's like, this is what we're talking about. It's this stuff. It's not porn addiction. This is the thing we're actually talking about. This is the underlying problem. And so it I don't know, it kind of made a lot feel clearer for me. Oh, there you are.
Where's he gone?
Hang on, Jacob, you just dropped off a bit.
You've lost
your audio. Oh, now we've lost him.
That's strange. Maybe he'll come back.
He'll be back. But yeah, am I way off? I feel like it's...
No, you're spot on. You're spot on. It's I wouldn't say I'm an expert in sexual narcissism, but it's really interesting, this research that's coming out, which is identifying as being addicted to porn or addicted to sex with narcissism. It's either narcissism or religiosity.
Right.
So for the religious people, it's like it's taboo, so they're deeply ashamed of it. And then I think for people who are very high in narcissism, it's the way in which they use porn to replace relationships that maybe causes them problems.
Yeah, that's
potentially.
Yeah, I can see it. So sex
or is it it's the problems with the relationships, which means they watch a lot of porn and they see it as a problem.
Yeah, I see.
There we go. Okay. I swear to God, I have friends who only want to communicate with me or do literally anything when I'm in the middle of being live or some shit. I'm frustrated. God. Anyways, what the fuck were you talking about? Sexual narcissism, it's great. Fuck.
Yeah, sexual narcissism and porn. Bring it on. Let's have some of that. Yeah, sorry. No, I've talked the last track of where we were now. Sorry, what had you just said? It's been a long day.
I don't even remember now.
So I guess like I kind of want to touch on a little bit about how so like where I kind of see, because like what I see the most in sexual narcissism is just this disconnection from any sort of intimacy, right? Which, and I think this can take an opposite kind of role too, of when you don't want to be intimate with somebody, of like detaching yourself from sex. But like for me, I always use sex as a form of self-esteem regulation. And I was always confused by the idea of sex being an intimate thing, right? How do I feel emotionally connected to somebody through sex? So it's interesting to view this as like kind of a protection against the shame that's inherent in being vulnerable in a sexual context.
Bingo.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That makes so much sense.
Totally.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how to respond to it. But yeah, it does make a lot of sense. There is that. I have experienced that connection, but sometimes it's work, you know, and it can be, it sort of, it adds a layer of effort onto things, because that doesn't necessarily come as naturally in the first place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, it can be wearing. And it's good to sometimes not worry about that. But that's a complicated thing to explain and go into,
like
on
the
a live
performance
YouTube
aspect of it.
Right, performance brings a massive is a massive anxiety thing for me, I think, and it's a self-applied narcissistic pressure, because it is something to feel narcissistic about, and it's something that we talk about how there's been that sort of adolescent trauma that we've all had, and we get stuck in that adolescent mindset with various things. And I kind of feel like sex and sexuality has been one of those things that I still have a very sort of naturally juvenile attitude towards. And it has made me very narcissistic about it, because I've put much more emphasis on its importance in life in general than normal people do. Right. And it's something that I've found to be narcissistic about. And then, which again brings with it all of the problems as listed in tweets and various things like that. It is very damaging. It is very sort of limiting and worrying and all kinds of things all at the same time.
So it's an interesting pattern that I kind of see. I'm curious if you relate to it, or if Ruth, you've seen this in clinical situations, of where the first couple times sleeping with somebody, it's almost like pleasure is barely a component at all. It's purely, I need this person to think that I am a good lover, and this anxiety about not being one. And then after that, as I get more comfortable with this person, the entitlement starts to come out more of, I just kind of want to get off. I don't feel as much pressure to perform because I already have, more or less. Yeah,
no, that's absolutely a thing.
Yeah. But what I've also seen is, for men particularly, in that I've got to perform and show myself to be the best lover, it's not so good for sustaining an erection.
Oh yeah, I've never had that issue, but I can easily see, that anxiety and pressure could obviously put some, issues down there.
Some. So there is a sort of interesting, I don't know if there's any research on it, but I certainly know I'm not the only person who works with MPD who's come across a lot of men who have problems getting an erection, in that, particularly with a new partner where there's a lot of pressure, a lot of performance. And it's not only people with MPD have that as a problem, but it's certainly something that can kind of happen.
it feels like it's gonna be one of those things that we do that is, most people will have some sort of, everyone has anxiety to some extent when you're sleeping with a new person for the first time. That's just a natural nervousness, whatever. You'd maybe be a little more unhinged if you had no anxiety sleeping with a new person for the first time.
That seems like it would lead to some worrying behaviors.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, if it's a normal behavior that normal people have, we can just take that and run with it. And it's like, you want anxiety, we'll show you anxiety. That kind of thing. And so we just make it so much worse. And it's a pressure I feel all the time. And it has not once ever come from an outside source. Not ever in my life. I've never had negative reinforcement in that way. It's all from me. I've decided how I have to be, and I have to live up to this. And if I don't, I'm awful.
Yeah.
And it's all me.
I often thought it was coming from an outside source, though, which is interesting, because I would basically, especially after I'd be finished, I would project a lot of the insecurities and shame about the action onto the person. I remember so vividly being with one of my exes, and we would sleep together, and me walking away to get a towel and thinking, oh, she must think I'm so disgusting right now. She must think I'm so poor in bed and stuff like that. And I even got I would get snippy and angry with her because I thought she was judging me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That'll kill your relationship.
No, yeah, it did. Trust me, it killed the sex.
That's it. You're done.
That was one of my longer relationships. I was 4 months.
Yeah, that'll do it. But it is, you are disconnected from your own pleasure, from the intimacy, because you're not there experiencing something with someone. You're there to do a job. You're there to perform.
Yeah.
And
which means you don't get pleasure for yourself, but it's also probably not as pleasurable for the other person.
Exactly.
Oh, I beg to differ.
Of course you do.
But yeah.
You're the best lover ever.
Speaking of sexual narcissism, man.
That's the one.
I think that plays out sometimes in a really adventurous approach to sex, which is not, there's nothing wrong with that. But you do find that some people with this kind of sexual narcissism will really get into quite unusual things that are quite extreme.
Interesting. Well, I kind of had the opposite.
That can be one of those double-edged things. I mean, on the one hand, go have fun, be exciting, be adventurous, explore things, whatever. And then that can go too far. Obviously, that can go too far and lead to some very bad things and destroy relationships and all that kind of thing. We're good at that.
This is it's on topic, but kind of random thing I just thought of. Is I was having a conversation with my friends, and me and her used to have these conversations about how our sex lives and what that said about our psychology, right? And there became a conversation about our spirit positions and stuff. And something she pointed out that I found very interesting and kind of proof to how sexual narcissism affects intimacy is she pointed out that all my favorite positions, the person was looking away from it.
Yeah. There is a certain lack of, there is very much a lack of intimacy in those situations. And it is kind of like that. Just don't look at me.
I remember once, another one that don't look at me is so fucking real. But I remember once, this is just a weird sex memory I had. I was hooking up with this girl relatively frequently. And it became very obvious to me that she was catching some sort of feelings. And it almost pissed me off that she was trying to turn it into something intimate. Because I remember ranting to my therapist about it, her thinking, oh, she thinks she's like me, or she'll ever understand me. I'm so much better. She's just a human fleshlight to me and shit like that. And how I'm just thinking about, I'm not exactly sure what to take from that, but the idea that I got so offended over her thinking there was an intimate aspect to that.
Interesting.
Although most people will want the intimate aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. I think we want that. I mean, because look, Judy in the chat has asked the question, what would be an ideal sex life for MPB, and I can't say words tonight.
MVP.
To not have one then. And no, I think the ideal sex life would be to have the one we imagine we want in our heads.
Yeah, but you can't have that. That's not real.
Yeah, it's not real, and trying to get it is damaging us from having anything at all. So no, the ideal is not to not have one. We want the ideal dream fantasy thing that cannot be. We want every night should be like some sort of porn film or something like that, whatever. And not even porn happens really. It's so not real, any of it. But we get, this is just indicative of everything we do. It's that whole, we want the fantasy, take it to the nth degree, that sort of thing. Sorry, go ahead.
You probably need to accept an ordinary sex life.
Yeah.
Where it's a bit awkward on occasion.
Yeah. Although I don't know, I think well, no, that's way off topic. Yeah, maybe you do. You just have to accept something that is at least realistic, and realistic sex lives are much more boring than the fantasy version. That's why there's a fantasy version, I suppose.
But then again, there is an element of sex that I think, I say that you have to accept an ordinary sex life, and yet to an extent you do. It's like when I work with the real performance anxiety around sex, it's like it is about letting off the pressure and just enjoying the moment for what it is, especially if someone's having erectile issues, because the more pressure you put on yourself to get it up, it's not coming. Literally. But
absolutely.
So there is a need for that. But then also, sex is a kind of thing people do where it is escaping reality for a bit. You get out of your head and you act out all kinds of fantasy and you play. And a level of self-enhancement is probably not a bad thing. And Esther Perel will say women need to be narcissistic when they have sex because they need to switch off the caregiving role and be the turn-on.
Makes sense.
Her kind of the way she puts it is like, for most men, they want to turn the woman on, and most women get off on being the turn-on.
It's true. It's very, very true, which always confused me. Oh no, actually, well, kind of.
There are so many things you learn about relationships that make you wonder how any of us were born. About just the natural incompatibilities between, like, how did anyone get together ever? Especially once. It's like we're not compatible in so many ways naturally that we have to learn about how men and women work differently. It's just a wonder that anyone got together.
But that works perfectly well if you have that dynamic. He wants to turn her on. She wants to be turned on. Or she wants to be
that works on. Oh, she wants to be the turn on.
She wants to be the turn on.
I guess it kind of works. I see what you're saying. Now, one of the things that whenever I've read about sexual narcissism before, it tends to always go to the darker side of things. Like this is an area that involves a lot of coercion and almost grooming of people, and the classic violence. YouTube dark sexual violence, all of that.
That is tipping into coercive control, predatory behavior, quite antisocial behavior. That is, to me, that's not just narcissism. I've worked with plenty of narcissistic men who are highly proud of their sexual performance, who place a great emphasis on consent.
And I actually, because that's actually part of the reasoning I was doing a lot of research in sexual narcissism, is because like the association between sexual narcissism and like sexual violence, for instance. And that's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but I do want to point out that the finding that I did find is while sexual narcissism is associated with that kind of behavior, if you control for sexual narcissism, general narcissism has no correlation with something like that. So basically, NPD by itself gives no inclination towards that. It's just the manifestation in the sexual sense.
Do you have that research?
I would have to find it again. I can.
Yeah, I'd like to read it. I think it's, you know, it's like everything is like on a spectrum, isn't it? And at the one end of the spectrum, it starts to, you have NPD, but you also have the dark triad.
Yeah.
You have the Machiavellianism, you have the psychopathy. That's where you're going to see much more in the way of controlling behaviors.
Because
it's like assault and coercion.
It always felt like the kind of thing you would get a Ramani video about, or something like that. It's the stuff that is meant to, it gets put on narcissists, on people with NPD, and you're right, it's much more darker, more criminal, psychopathic, dark triad stuff.
Exactly.
We're
much more performance based.
And I do think there's a big difference between well, and like, yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing is like, how can I get self-esteem juice from sexual behavior when that sexual behavior isn't consensual, right? There's no achievement there unless you think the achievement is the aggression and the violence and sadism. But also I think that's important to kind of point out that, like, I feel like there's not a fine enough, I think there's not enough of a gray area when it comes to something like that, which this sounds so fucking bad. But like, what I'm saying is, like, I think there's a difference between, like, I feel like a lot of people treat things like sexual coercion and sexual assault as the same as, like, being kind of shitty when it comes to having sex with somebody, right? Does that make sense? I'm trying to think of like good examples right now, so it doesn't sound like I'm just like justifying sexual assault. But like things like let's say like two people are like a little tipsy at a party, right? And one of those people has like a boyfriend, and that person probably wouldn't do it. It probably wouldn't hook up with the other drunk person if it weren't for the effect of alcohol. I think that's hugely different than a full-on like sexual assault. Does that make sense?
It does, although if you know. There are certainly gradations, but most rapes are not violent.
True.
You know, I think that's worth mentioning. So, yeah, I think if you're deliberately giving someone alcohol to get them into bed, that's certainly,
that would be I would consider that an assault. Yeah.
But if you're flattering someone and you're all having a good time, and you end up doing something impulsive, I kind of think, well, that's
like charming someone to get into bed with them.
That's dating.
True.
Yeah.
But it also can be seen as kind of like, what if you're misleading them, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? If
like,
you're misleading and you're promising that you want a long-term relationship, but actually what you really want is a one-night stand, or you're telling them that the only person you're sleeping with, and actually you have multiple other partners. I mean, that is coercive, because then the person's not really consenting because they don't know what your intentions are.
Again, I think, and I guess my point was something like that is definitely shitty and shouldn't happen. And I probably would associate that more with sort of a sexual narcissism sort of stuff. And then the distinction between that and then like a full-on like intentionally drugging somebody or something. Yeah.
Well, one of those could get you a conviction for rape. Whether it would or not is another matter.
Yeah. I'm glad you came up with the flattering example, because I was like, man, I'm not sounding very good in terms of what I'm trying to say right now.
It's a tricky area.
And I think the other thing is, like, I mean, it's just to say that it's not about justifying the behavior.
Yes, but it's just that and it's like, that's what I say about abuse too, is that like, I feel like there should be more of a gradient when it comes to like emotional abuse and stuff like that. But there just isn't. And I feel like we think of it in a very black and white way when that might not do the full situation justice.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you say about that. You know, the narcissist needs consent. It's essential, because I mean, look, the other end of that spectrum is if I'm not getting consent, I'm not getting angry about that. I'm going home to cry and think about how fucking awful I am.
Yeah,
And
honestly.
that sort of thing, right? If you like turning me down, they just destroyed me. There's no further violence after that. I need to go home and do violence in my own brain to myself.
I feel like
You know,
if I'm rejected like that, it's going to be a combination of feeling like I'm worthless and ugly, and also I'm a creep for trying to get with somebody who wasn't interested in me.
absolutely. And so consent is that's just essential, because then that's a further thing that I can feel good about. That's a further thing that can boost me.
I find it honestly really hard to initiate any sort of sexual contact for those reasons, for the fear of rejection and the fear of coming off as creepy.
I have right now, and I know this comes from like late adolescent years. I have a lot of sort of fear and panic with like initial contacts and that sort of thing, because I have had negative reinforcement on that. I've dealt with teenage girls as a teenage boy, not recently, and
Yeah, where's we go with that?
to be clear, and it was, you know, that is a horrible time of your life, right?
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
That, just for everyone, that is horrible. And so much of that stayed with me to this day. And I still battle all of that negative reinforcement from like school days.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. It's horrible. And so, yeah, there's that barrier. But once I get over that hump and then I'm into the stuff that school days didn't affect, then I don't know, I'm much better. But yeah, I was definitely damaged by things in like late teenage years. And I still maintain that the worst years of your life are 15, 16, and 17. Like that's as bad as it gets. Barring years of your life where sort of significant life events happen that can be bad, that sort of thing, you know. But all things being equal, that period, 15 to 17, when you're old enough to know that you want to do things and what those things are, but not in any way old enough to be allowed to do them or handle them. And it's those three. Once you hit 18, you just go run with it again. That's fine. But 17, man, that was a horrible year.
Honestly, I was 15 years old. Man, that was terrible for me. 16, 17, going forward, it was pretty okay.
We might have different cultural differences due to.
Yeah, I feel well, for me, it was like, because I went from, that's when like my transformation happened of like when I was like around 16 was when I like cut my hair and started acting basically like a narcissist and like I do nowadays. It kind of turned my life around.
What was your hairstyle before?
Fucking like the most wretched bowl cut you see in your life. Just like emo hair, more or less.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah, good. I also was a lot heavier too. It was like not a good look for me. I looked weird. My dad
all have those.
Then when I lost weight, my dad called me the mop because of my haircut.
I'm just catching up with the chat room a little bit because I've kind of.
There's a lot of people in there.
From what I saw, most people are just still talking about pornography.
Yeah, they are. I assume you're all enjoying porn then. Okay, fair enough. Thank you for the subscription there. That always scares the crap out of me when it happens. Did you guys hear the bark?
No, I didn't.
What's that?
Oh, someone when there's a subscriber to the channel, it plays Paisley barking, and it scares the crap out of me every time.
Judy said $50 for Jacob's emo hair.
Yeah, you're going to need more than that. Pay my.
We'll show the ankle, not the hair.
Pay more. Pay my mortgage for next month. You get to see that.
See, that's what we're all only interested in. It's like I just want to pay bills, man. Like, you know. Sorry, I'm still reading chat room here. Oh, God, there are so many of you. Hello, everybody. Oh, and then it just reset to the bottom. I'm giving up on that. Try sending super chats or something. I'll be able to see those. Yeah. Well, I don't know where else to go with it now, really. But I feel somewhat more comfortable with the idea. And it's given me a lot to think about with regards to sexual narcissism and intimacy.
I did kind of, while we're talking about this, I kind of realized pretty early into the conversation, I'm like, there isn't that much to talk about when it comes to this.
Yeah, I think it was definitely worth mentioning, though. It's still a very interesting area to me, for various reasons.
I think it's an interesting area, and I think it's an area that kind of hasn't really been looked at until quite recently. The kind of the people who research sex and identifying as being a porn addict or sex addict are only recently realizing the extent of to which narcissism plays into those presentations. So I think that's going to be interesting to see if there's anything specific that comes out of that. You know, although I did talk to someone who said, well, we need to teach them to be empathic. And I'm like, this doesn't really work.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Teach people to be empathic.
Honestly.
You have to experience empathy.
Yeah, I don't envy your job. I really don't. When I think of how frustrating people with NPD are, I just always imagine the conversation of, well, you need to have empathy. Why? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer when you tell someone they need to have empathy and they say, why?
But that doesn't work. You don't. There's no point telling someone have more empathy.
There's very few things that I think come with narcissism that are like actually, that I view as actually beneficial. Lack of empathy is one of those few things I'm like, I do not see a downside of this.
Until you don't have much of a connection with other people because they don't feel understood.
This is it.
They don't feel seen.
Wait, you broke up there for a second. What was that?
I said until the other person doesn't feel understood or seen, and it affects the connection with them.
And then I'll find a new person.
There's the narcissist.
There's always more people. There's always more people. That's
plenty of fish in the sea.
And they all love us. So it's...
And they all say you're the best lover they've ever had.
Oh,
this is it. This is it. I honestly, it's like, but how do you tell people that without me sounding like I'm just bragging and full of shit? I don't know. There's just no good way. So you have to not say it.
You have to lean into it. Self-aggrandizing humor is the best thing that you can do. Like, make it just so over the top that it's a joke, but then they also know at some level, they also know there's some truth to it.
That's true, because they know that when I say the dark shit, right? When I say the horrible thing as a joke, and they're sat there going, it's funny, but does he really think that?
Yeah.
You know, I should just do it the other way. I'd never thought of that.
My one friend once told me, he was like, Jacob, I feel like whenever you say anything, you wait to gauge people's reaction and then decide if it was a joke after you say it. And I'm like, yeah, that's basically how it goes. More or less.
Are we just at this point getting together and teaching each other how to be better narcissists? Because sometimes it feels like that's what we're doing.
We should have like, honestly. I have a friend who's a narcissist, and she says she wants to start like a support group for like the narcissists who are just like really bad at it, and like give them like tips and tricks to, like the ones that are going around just like completely oblivious to how they're coming off and just like super boastful. It's like, okay, here's what you do. You have to pretend to be humble, right? People like you better when you pretend to be humble. If you are self-aggrandizing, make a joke about it. Diversify your portfolio of self-esteem juice.
This is all.
It's DBT for narcissists.
This is good.
It's DBT for narcissists.
Yeah, DBT for narcissists. Just see, and this is something I ask myself a lot though. Is it counterintuitive to my recovery of me basically trying to redirect my narcissistic urges into behaviors that are better for me and the people around me, but it's still based around getting self-esteem regulation.
Right. I've concluded that's okay because I do it too.
It's a change of behavior, isn't it?
It is, and like to the benefit of basically everybody around me.
I'd be more interested in whether you can. I mean, I think yes, it's good to diversify your source of self-esteem juice because then it's more stable. Because if you mess up in one area, you've got others to fall back on. Right? I can see that. Right? But then I'd also say is that then being like, I've got to be amazing at multiple things. I've got to be the best at everything. And I don't ever really feel accepted as I am. And I can't tolerate any weakness.
Well, yeah, but like.
And then the other person never really feels seen or heard. So you don't get close to them. So you need to keep going with diversified self-esteem juice sources in order to maintain any kind of self-esteem. It's kind of get a little bit fucked up. But yes, learning not to act so narcissistic is probably good for your relationship.
Exactly. There's some benefits to it. I'm still just loving the idea of NPD, DBT, which is just like teaching them how to not look like a narcissist while still being a narcissist. Oh my god, that's fucking funny. Because it's, and like honestly, like a big way that I view it is kind of like, I'm not sure to the extent that recovery is possible for people with BPD, NPD. But I think if there is like a long term of like, oh, I can actually connect to people in a fulfilling way, then basically using these other strategies to still regulate your self-esteem in more less healthy ways in the meantime isn't a bad like short-term strategy.
I think of it as being on a spectrum, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is healthier and less healthier, toxic and less toxic, and you want to be heading towards the healthier end of the spectrum.
It all boils down to that age-old question of what does recovery look like?
And it shouldn't be
what is healthy?
It shouldn't be no sense of being special. It shouldn't be not being able to achieve. It doesn't mean not being charismatic. It doesn't mean never having a grandiose side, because where's the fun in that? I mean, it shouldn't be making yourself boring and tedious.
Absolutely.
Like, I think the way that I usually hear it described, I think is probably the best way to, I mean, I don't know what this process looks like, but being able to kind of simultaneously accept your grandiosity and your vulnerability without you having to be in one of those camps and not the other at any given point.
I agree. Ray's asked a question.
He has. Does reparenting help build empathy better for people with NPD like myself?
There isn't. This is where, if you're asking me for a research answer on that, I can't give you one. There really isn't research on that. But from clinical experience, I think the first thing is to build some empathy for yourself, and not to expect someone who hasn't been empathized with and hasn't experienced someone having compassion and kindness towards them to be able to do that to other people. So yes, I would expect that if you have empathy if you build self-empathy, hopefully that begins to rub off on other people.
What is reparenting?
So reparenting is a term in schema therapy. So the idea is that people with NPD or BPD have unmet needs in childhood. And the goal in therapy is to, in some way, meet those needs. And they call it reparenting. I don't know if I like that term, to be honest.
It sounds almost like, I don't know, it's like a fetish thing. Or maybe sexual narcissism is still online.
Yeah. That's not how it's viewed.
Although that is a thing.
Yeah. Like unfortunately.
Well, for that reason, there are people who take that peace and calm of being childlike, and I can see how they experience some sort of reparenting. You're just letting someone else take care of you for a bit. And while that's not my thing, but I get what you could get out of that potentially.
Like,
as weird as it is.
Age regression in a sexual context is very scary to me. I had an experience once, actually. This is a weird story. I don't remember it super well, but I do remember once, like, I was talking to this girl and I was at her house, and she was like acting like completely normal until, like, I like came on to her, and then she started talking in like a baby voice, and my first thought was, oh my God, this person has like childhood sexual trauma, and I just shoved them back. I made them flashback. I was like convinced. I literally got up to leave because I was so afraid of what was going on.
That's the most distressing pickup story ever. I touched this girl. I brought up her childhood trauma.
Like, literally. Oh,
she's in the hospital now.
Yeah.
They've up some medication.
Oh my God, that was so fucking distressing. And then like, she tried to continue the sexual like encounter, and I was like, but I still wasn't sure like if this was like a fetish thing or a trauma thing, and so like it was, and I'm like just like slowly backing away from this person as she's still trying to instigate this, and I was just like, yo kid, wait, and then she goes back into her normal voice and she's like, wait, what's wrong? And I'm like, what do you mean what's wrong? Are you not listening to yourself? I did not. That was the last time I saw that girl.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've never had that one. That one is a new one on me.
No, that would freak me out too. I'd be like, no, not turn on.
Yeah, the baby voice. It's not sexy. It's just not. It belongs in that weird pile of, I don't want to judge anybody and what they're into, but if you're into that,
but I'm still going to judge you, though.
I'm going to judge you. Yeah, it's like,
I don't want to judge anybody, but I am going to. That is just kind of fact of life.
That's it. I don't want to. Didn't say I wasn't going to.
You know what? Each to their own, if that's your thing. But you probably want to tell your partner that's your thing before you do your thing.
Yeah.
To make sure they're okay with it.
Please, for the love of God, please. Now I have trauma from that. Holy shit. I'm trying to think if I have any other, like, I'm like trying to think of any other amusing hookup stories that I have now. Just because I have, because I had a very long period of being basically, so I was like with this girl for a while, and I was like on and off with her, and I was like super obsessed with her. And so obviously what I do is, since we were on and off, whenever we were off, I wanted to make her jealous, so I'd go hook up with people, right? So I have a lot of stories from that era of trying to win back a girl by sleeping with other people.
I've never tried that attempt. That's an interesting logic to have taken with it.
Does it work?
I mean, it didn't not work.
Yeah, I didn't instantly dismiss it as crazy, but I mean it is. But there are people in the world for whom that would probably work. That's
here's what I'm saying. I'm saying if you want a healthy relationship, this isn't the way to go. If you just want to be with a specific person, fucking try it. Like, I give it the Jacob guarantee. As long as you're not dating them like in the moment, like between dating, just make them jealous a little bit. Exactly. Then you have to have mutual friends who you can tell, so that they'll tell that person so they find out. Because you can't go up to them and tell them, because then they'll know what you're doing. It's a very delicate process.
Is this what you're going to cover in your MPD course?
This is okay. I think this one shouldn't go in the MPD course. I'll make some like sleazy pickup artist like course that this can go into.
But there were like the game. Do you remember that, Rich?
The game.
Yeah, it was like a whole sort of thing about like how to date women, and it was basically the sexual narcissist handbook, like negging and putting someone down and then paying them a compliment, and it was awful. It was really horrible.
It came in the form of a game, didn't it? And it was some guy. There's been a million of these guys on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. Because you're talking to, if you want to talk to guys who are struggling to meet girls, that's a big audience. And I mean, God, this is an audience I've honestly looked at myself. Like, how can I talk to these people? Because there's a lot of people to talk to.
Rich, holy shit! Like, this is a fucking this is $1 million idea. How? A narcissist. How to get girls the narcissist way.
The narcissist way. This is just like the OCD cleaning company, isn't it? This is where we need to go with it.
Oh, I can just imagine. So, like, just going on some like incel forums and being like, "Listen, guys, I got all the tricks you need. It's hardwired in here."
Yeah, but it was a thing a few years ago, and they were just popping up everywhere, and they were basically just guides on how to sexually assault or harass women. and you must never do any of the things that I saw in them, because they're all horrible, horrible things and ways of mistreating people and not getting you what you actually want in the end.
That's so weird.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think there's all of that community, and there's a lot of young men who just don't know what to do with themselves and don't know how to handle it and that sort of thing. I still think we're lacking. I still think we're lacking a lot of positive male role models.
True. Yeah.
I agree, and I don't like the whole discourse around toxic masculinity, because I think it just tells men like being a man is a toxic thing, and I don't think that's true.
Because I think like I kind of view it as kind of a shame that the term has been abused in the way that it has been, because I do think toxic masculinity can be used to refer to a genuine thing that can be problematic, right? Like refusing to be vulnerable for reasons like that. Yeah. But they just use it to describe masculinity in general.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It isn't.
Yeah, I think changing what we consider masculinity and qualities of a man and all of that needed tweaking, and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's I don't think there are any I always joke about, and it's one of those times where I'm joking, but it's actually true when I say that a lot of how I learned about like how to talk to women and that kind of thing really did come from watching Commander Riker in Star Trek.
Interesting.
And there's nothing like that, where you had a character who was a likable person who was quite smooth and slick with women or aliens of any gender, and yet was not abusive and horrible and slimy and creepy and gross and all of that. It was an example of decent masculinity and manhood and being nice. And I don't see that anymore.
I think manhood should be in some degree celebrated in terms of like some of the positive aspects of it. And I think that like I feel like a lot of things traditionally considered masculine nowadays I wouldn't consider masculine and are just kind of weird and toxic. And it comes from this community of people that I see, which this is a type of person that has always really confused me. The types of people that view that their worldview is painted through this lens of like genders, of like basically everything is man versus woman, or through sexuality is also closely related to that, of like straight and gay and stuff. And it's led to a really bizarre dialogue on what constitutes manlyhood and masculinity.
Like it's all one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a way to exclude people. It's a way to other people in one way or another. It's gatekeeping to a certain extent.
Yeah.
There a
Here's a
question.
Yeah. So as MPDs, do you prefer your sexual partners to be less or more experienced or about equal? I honestly don't care.
Less. I'm like, and this is a little toxic of me, but I like there's an inherently toxic kind of mindset of one, the less experienced they are, like the less the expectation is for me. And this is like, I would call this probably some kind of internalized what's it called? Misogyny, where it's like, oh, like the less person that it's more impressive that I can sleep with somebody who is more restrictive in the people that they will sleep with.
I never thought
Yeah.
of that. Yeah. There's definitely more prestige in sleeping with somebody that is less likely to do that.
A good friend of mine pointed out recently, because we had this conversation, he kind of pointed out how I was always either in a relationship or had to be pursuing somebody. And I was like, shit, I guess I do that. And my hate for people that need to be in relationships is projection. Great, mind blown. But something that he mentioned is usually the women that I would end up pursuing are people who are, at least on the surface, almost unobtainable. Like either like people who are very selective in who they date, or people who are sometimes in relationships, or people who I have like bad histories with or something like that.
Right. So you go for people that it would cause problems with if you got them.
Yeah. No, and he said that it was probably a combination of me being self-flagellating and of if I am able to achieve that, then that's like, that proved my worth to some degree. Like a lot of it is about proving that I can, as opposed to anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That doesn't make sense.
I'm lucky I have that friend, because we, like, ever since we were like in middle school, we just have a very long, in-depth conversation about our internal experiences and how they compare. And it leads to a lot, and probably half of the content on my YouTube channel comes from those conversations.
He knows you.
Unfortunately.
I've never had anyone else notice my behavior that much. Actually, no, Kat does. She does. But
because how the relationship came about was really interesting, because this person, they were kind of the person that it's like acts as kind of like a therapist for all their friends, right? And it started to feel very fake for them, because it felt like they were just able to say the same things over and over again to whoever had these issues, and like it would get the same positive result, and it made them feel very disingenuous and not really connected to people. Then I was the first person who they tried to do that, and it just made things worse. And they said it was when I started a fire in my yard after they tried to calm me down that they were like, there might be more to something. There might be more of this guy.
They were trying to calm you down, and you started a fire. Okay, fair enough.
That's diagnostic.
So
like, no one's ever done that to me. No one's ever started a fire outside my therapy office.
Yeah, I guess so. You're doing better than them then.
So over the last few years, a couple of people have asked me the question, why in group therapy did they have therapists there and not just leave you all to get on with it? This is why.
They come back, fucking fire going on in the center of the group.
This is why. Yeah, because not everybody would leave every week. That's why. Unfortunately.
Like I was being so, because I was going through this like weird phase, like weird pyromaniac phase, where wherever I get pissed off, I just burn shit. And then like they were trying, it's like saying calm down, like it's a normal reaction. I'm like, fuck you, and I just go outside and start a fire. Like once I burnt my hair because I got mad. I poured a bunch of gasoline on my little burning pit, and I didn't anticipate how the fire would kind of like whoosh, and it burnt my bangs off.
Shit.
Wow.
You can get
really badly injured doing that. You can get really badly injured if that goes wrong.
Oh yeah, that's why I stopped doing it. Also because also because my parents started to notice that probably wasn't normal that I was like burning shit all the time, so they kind of put a stop to that.
Yeah, not the hair. Not the hair, says Judy.
In fairness, this was when I was like 14, 15, so the hair wasn't good yet, so it could burn all it wanted.
I did have a few face fire incidents throughout A-level chemistry, but they were born more out of stupidity than rage.
Well, it was a combination of both for me, for sure.
Yeah.
Remember once, like me and my buddy fucking because we just like burning things too because we were teenagers, and we get this like we get a bunch of rubbing alcohol and make a circle of it in my driveway. We light it on fire, and the wind hits it perfectly. That makes like a fire tornado, and we're like, we just summoned the devil.
See, did we ever consider this as the start of the narcissism? Are you really possessed? This could be a thing.
Yeah, I knew they were onto something.
Were you playing with Ouija boards? You were fine one day, and then
You let the devil in.
Yeah. All those people saying I'm possessed, maybe they were onto something. I forgot about that time in my life.
yeah, we've all got that. It's that NPD demon that lives inside us.
You know, I think back to times like that in my life, and I think how like back then, I remember like I would hear the term neurotypical, and I took like a lot of offense to that term because I didn't like it because I thought I was a neurotypical, and I think, wow, how is that the conclusion that I came to about myself?
Yeah, no, I've never been right.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. Well then, does anyone in the chat have any questions they want to ask before we go, or anything like that?
Ray
asked a question. Have you or I had a rage for a while?
Define rage, because there's so many like levels.
Yeah, I had my I'm gonna shut it all down and delete it rage a couple of weeks ago. That was the thing. That was a mini rage.
Oh, that was when you announced on Twitter that it was your last ever live stream with me.
Yeah, it was my last live stream.
Yeah, hang on, that's a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, it was that I was going to burn it all. I was going to delete it all and everything. That was probably a little rage.
Because I'll have like mini rages, sure, where I just like get pissed off and I yell at them about like something that's just like nothing. But I haven't had like a full blown losing control rage for like probably about a year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I probably had one about 6 months ago. Like when I think of like a rage, I'm thinking of me losing my shit, like storming off and like pacing outside yelling.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done the uncontrollable pacing. And yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, that was one. Sorry about all that stuff. Yeah, that was a rage.
I just remember like because I saw the tweet as like my second last live stream name was Narcissist. I was like, oh, noted. Everyone's quitting.
Yeah. It was like I was ready to just honestly delete the lot, but it was I think that I'm now at a point where that particularly stressful month period of my life has come to an end now, and I'm powering forward. Yeah. I still want to do stuff and change stuff, but powering forward in a much less ragey and nutty kind of way.
Yeah. So I guess Ray, I think my last my last big rage was probably a year and a half ago. And then there was one like 6 months ago that I don't know if I'd consider it like a big rage, but it was like close. The screaming and shouting at a family member and stuff hasn't happened for probably no, did I yell? I don't remember. Yeah, I have slip-ups. It happens, Ray. Don't feel bad.
That's it. It happens. I think as long as we're all moving in the right direction and doing it less and for less time and that sort of thing, that seems to be the right thing to do.
It's happening less, so that's good.
That's where I go with it.
It is.
It's happening less.
It is good.
It is. What is that? Super anxiety. chick. Sorry, it doesn't all fit on the screen. When you experience hypersexuality in a relationship but zero interest in sex outside a relationship, would a friends with benefits be a healthier balance? Especially because I have AVPD. I can go years with avoidant personality. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I do sometimes wonder if, you know, different alternative relationship structures might fit different people better depending on what you're dealing with and who you are as a person. I wouldn't necessarily recommend something outright, but I don't know.
Well, I would say what's the goal there? Is it just the sex part of it, or is it trying to seek a genuine relationship?
It'd be very interesting to find if this was therapy, which it isn't because it's YouTube. But it'd be very interesting to understand what is the hypersexuality about in a relationship. Like, I do the hypersexual thing rather than the emotional connection.
Yeah, is it a need to feel close to them, or like a need to know that they still find you attractive or are still interested in you? Is it trying to win? Well, I guess with the ADPD, I wonder if it's a constant like people pleasing sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'd be really interested to know what that's about. And then also the zero interest. I mean, I'd be interested as well. Is that like low libido, or is that kind of being shut off and shut down? And would there be a way to kind of increase pleasure and desire? Sex breeds desire for more sex.
See, what I took from it was to the idea of when this person is in a relationship, they become feel hypersexualized and want to have sex probably more than the boundaries of their relationship would allow. And so they're stuck in a place where out of a relationship, they're not really interested in doing anything. Whereas in one, they're only interested in doing stuff that might well mean the end of that relationship. So if they're with someone in a friends with benefits thing, that is something of a balance between the two, and might allow them some degree of freedom whilst also giving them the feeling of being in a relationship. But I don't know. I mean,
they've said definitely people pleasing. Spot on, Jacob.
I'm an expert in personality disorders.
So I will tell you what I would suggest to you in a relationship would be to give yourself some permission to focus on your own pleasure.
The hypersexuality thing feels like another thing that there's not. Is there much about that out there? It's always the thing that, especially more so with the BPD side of things, people are always asking me about it.
So much of it comes with a whole ton of moral judgment. Like, define hypersexual. Is it more horny than your therapist? I mean, literally, how do you define it?
True. I mean, like, because I have like a relatively speaking pretty high libido. Because like I remember looking up the average amount of time a couple has sex, and it like blew my mind because it felt very low. But like I wouldn't consider myself like hypersexual by any means. I do think I have a higher libido because of like my sensation-seeking tendencies. But it's like
I've always linked the hypersexuality more with the BPD side of things than the NPD side of things.
Yeah.
Much more so.
I think it serves different. I mean, I think the question would be is what function does it serve? Is your sex drive a way to get close to someone and to experience enjoyment? Is it more about pleasing the other person in a very self-sacrificing way?
It's a very difficult question to answer.
It is a difficult question. It's different for different people.
Difficult. Yeah.
And it may be different for the same person at different times.
Because in times of it, right, I can only describe the hypersexuality thing as like it doesn't feel connected to anything. It feels like just a period of, and it's not even like, you know, being very horny or something like that. It's a period where sex just sort of it moves itself right to the front of your mind all the time. And I mean, it probably is connected with something. It's a very difficult question to answer because it doesn't feel like it is. It's not that obvious a thing internally. I continue to look for the answer to that question, but I still don't have it. It's a tricky one.
I guess when I'm pursuing sex, it's universally either, if I'm in a committed relationship, it's usually just about I'm horny and want like to get off. And then if it's like a hookup or something, horniness has nothing to do with it, obviously, but it's way more about the idea of proving that I can more than anything else.
Yeah. I mean, it feels clear that there are other things linked to it, but I don't know what they are. I don't know what they are. There's for me personally, there's a whole lot of self-analysis that I need to just sit and work through, and just sort of contemplate things because it's so difficult. It's not that obvious, and it's one of the more mysterious elements of BPD and all of that. No one else seems to know what it's about really, or have much to say about it. Oh, now there's one. There's a good one. What has been the longest running relationship you've had before it becomes toxic? Does it ever leave the honeymoon stage where there's lots of intimacy? And what grabbed me there was, what's the longest running relationship you've had, was all I saw first. And I thought, oh, quite a number of years. And then I saw before it becomes toxic. And I thought, oh, not so long. Because the time between end of relationship and becoming toxic is sadly, that can be a long time apart. I'm in one now that isn't toxic.
Because I would say for me, I question whether it was ever not toxic just because of my intentions in these relationships and how I view them, and my boundaries are always going to be sort of flawed. And how when I'm trying to get into a relationship, how I'm idealizing them most of the time. And I would say that on its own, it could be considered toxic.
I see that is a thing to think about. That I've not felt that I'm idealizing the person I'm with now, whereas I have done historically throughout relationships. So those have become toxic.
Feels weird.
Where you just sort of, I define the toxic as you are just spending more time sniping at each other and being angry with each other and just making each other miserable more than the opposite. And that has come very quickly for me in the past.
Yeah.
Very quickly. But I think it does depend on the person that you're with and what their state of mental health is as well.
Because that's why I wouldn't define it with the same definition, because in the relationships I've always found myself in, I am by far the dominant partner, so to speak, and the person just kind of ends up doing whatever I say. And I don't like that at all. I hate when my partners won't be my equal. But it still is very toxic if they aren't having their own voice.
Yeah. There's I understand what you're saying. I think if in general, if a relationship is doing harm to somebody within it, then it's toxic, and that harm can come in God knows how many forms.
You can think about it as well as being a spectrum rather than toxic and not toxic.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it can also go in waves of kind of, it's an interesting one because the kind of sniping and the impatience with each other, I think there's a degree to which that happens at certain times in all relationships. It's whether that's the only thing that's happening in your relationship and is the most pervasive and there's any repair. That's the question.
And how do you idealize partners as in a sex object? No, that's not it. I mean, it can be part of it, but that's not how I used to do it. In my mind, in my TV sitcom view of the world, my idealized partner is that it's the person you cast as in the wife/girlfriend role, and she is all of the personality traits and attitudes that nicely counterbalance the character of Rich.
It's just the perfectly compatible person.
Yeah. And this person does not exist. She is not written by a team of writers to have witty retorts to every comment I make. And you know, all of this, that's not real. So it comes crashing down. But that was how I idealized. My ideal partner was, you know, pick a sitcom and look at the wife, her.
And every time I get into a relationship like that, where I am idealizing this person, it's like they can do one thing that is not compatible with me, or I didn't find funny, or was like, or anything like that. And I will just like fixate on that and be like, oh my God, is this person actually not compatible with me at all? Is this not my soulmate?
That's it. So it's quite destructive, really. But we might, of course, idealize people as a sexual object as well. That could be a thing, I suppose. But it's far more than that. It's far more than that.
I'd say the real turning point that I view is like when the toxicity in my relationship really starts is when I get to this point that everything they do annoys me. And I always get to that point. It's really fucking annoying.
As once a certain level of contempt exists, there's no turning back, the finisher says. And that's it. That's it.
What was fucking Milton? Like, never can true reconcilement grow where fangs of hate have pierced so deep, or whatever.
That's the one. Oh, thank you, Grey Lizard. My lights will change color any second now. There we go. Yeah, it's once the level of contempt rises, that's it. And I remember seeing a TikTok of a therapist saying, you know, when you're doing the marriage counseling, if one partner is rolling their eyes when the other's speaking, that's it. They're not coming back from that, because there's contempt. That's it.
Yeah. There's I've forgotten what all four of them are. I can look it up. John Gottman, they talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that basically predict divorce. And one of them is contempt. I want to look up what the other one is now, because I've forgotten what they are. I think stonewalling is one. But I can certainly tell you, when I'm doing couples therapy, if there's a lot of contempt, that's happening. It. The others are criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
That's my last big relationship right there. All of that. Yeah, and that's it. And yeah, that makes sense. Did narcissists ever want hugs and affection? Yes, absolutely. I want hugs anyway. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, it's like, because like I do, well, like when it comes to romantic partners, it's basically like the only time, or like women I'm attracted to, is really the only time I really desire that kind of physical intimacy. But it gets very complicated depending on the situation. It becomes very circumstantial. Like there's a lot of times that, like, I love like cuddling and stuff, but then there's under certain circumstances I fucking hate hugging people, because like it feels like fake, and it feels like they feel connected to me when I am just not feeling it. So especially towards, and like, so that actually usually towards the tail end of relationships is usually when that actually becomes an issue.
It's certainly a sort of upgraded thing for me. I don't just give out hugs all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, there are friend hugs. It doesn't have to be, you know, just women I'm sexually attracted to that I'll hug. But yeah, it's you've reached a particular level in my life and estimations if I will give you that level of attention and care.
I would give a hug to basically anybody if they want it, because I feel like I have to.
See, now so how often do you hug your partners because you wanted a hug versus hugging them because you felt like it would keep them around longer? I've never done that. I
hug people back because I feel like I have to. I never initiate a hug that I don't want.
Oh no, I never initiate a hug that I don't want.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. But I've never done it as like a form of control or anything like that.
I don't know.
It's
Like,
not-
I've never done
and
it strategically.
it's a minor thing to do as a control. I've never had a hug me or I'm leaving kind of thing. You know, it's never been that level of thing. So it's what's Ray saying here. How do you know when the relationship becomes toxic? As a narcissist, being toxic is the desired outcome. That's normal too. I don't agree. I don't agree.
I think I know what they mean, but I don't like the wording. Because this is something I thought about like a long time ago. Most of these disorders are based around, you know, issues in childhood, and the dynamics that we are used to are very toxic dynamics, right? And a lot of times we will emulate those dynamics because it's basically all we know, and we think that's what actual love is. So I guess in that way, it's kind of the desired outcome, but it's not in terms of I want this to be a messed up situation. It's I want this to be what I know love as it is, as I know it, whatever.
I mean, it was something that I was sort of aware of and kind of checked myself for after leaving a relationship that was what I would say was very toxic and had all the constant arguing and bickering and that, because I had felt like I'd gotten into a state of this is a relationship. It involves this crap. And I didn't want to carry that forward because obviously relationships don't involve that crap or shouldn't. But yeah, it was something that I did watch out for, like just in case, because I felt, and at times when things did get stressful after that, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like, oh, I'm returning to how things should be. It had this, oh shit, it's happening again feeling.
Yeah.
Got, you know, stamped on pretty quick. So I guess with most things, if you can become aware of it, you can stop it happening.
I think as well, there's an idealism in narcissism that sometimes means that you've got the perfect early stage relationship that's all exciting, and that's the honeymoon phase that happens to everyone. And then you have a bad day and someone's boring or someone's tired or someone's not quite with it. And it's like, there you go, we're done.
Yep.
This relationship shit. And you can overread into arguments. Because if you live with someone for long enough, you're going to have an argument. That's kind of life.
Yeah.
You know, I remember having an argument with my other half, and it was when our daughter was very small. And he was just like, I don't think either of us would be having this argument if we hadn't had our sleep disturbed 3 times last night. And I was like, that's true, but I'm still right.
that is a level of observation I would not be capable of in an argument.
Right.
That is fantastic. I could come up with that afterwards in the apology.
Yeah.
I would not
have
have said that if I
he
had
realized
enough sleep.
At the time.
I rehearsed the argument 8 times in my head, and these are the things that I did wrong. But also, here's all the things that you did wrong too, bitch.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, I'll be right back.
Yeah, no, I used to overanalyze arguments over and over and over. They don't just happen once, they play on repeat in my brain. And it becomes that court style cross-examination of, well, she said that, and that really means that she thinks this and this and this, and I will then take it off to all these dark places and projecting my own dark thoughts onto what people are saying to just make what they've done a million times worse, and of course motivated by evil in some way, which again, not helpful.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah,
Not
yeah,
helpful.
that's like massively over, and that's where an ordinary argument gets toxic, because you start to read into it, you start to make all kinds of judgments about your partner and their motivations, and you don't repair, you don't kind of realize, hang on, we're both tired.
Exactly.
It never even occurs to me that when somebody is being a dick to me, that they're just tired or something.
I think it's a big thing. I think we all forget it, and it affects me a lot. Are you hungry? Or are you tired? You know, and it's difficult to not be angry when you're hungry.
Yeah,
you know, when you're not hungry.
Don't say that to someone. You don't say you are tired,
hell no.
and that's why you're being a dick. You have to say, I think we're both a little tired right now.
Yeah. Take
Especially
share
me.
the blame a little bit.
Especially me. I mean, not you. Maybe a little you. They'll figure it out themselves.
That's it. But it's definitely a problem. And I get with that all the time, the hungry and tired thing. That was like, that's most of my anger right there. Because I don't eat properly for some reason. I don't know why. That might be a weird thing. But yeah, whatever. So do we have any other questions, or shall we wrap that up? Or I tell you what, it's 10:30 here at night now. We should probably wrap this up.
I'm ready to wrap up. I have shit to do. Ugh.
Exactly. So thank you for watching, everybody, and thank you guys for joining me. It's been an absolute delight.
It's been fun. Thank you, Rich.
Of course, anytime.
So everybody watching live, thank you for watching again. Don't forget to subscribe, like the live feed and all of that. And we'll be back. Well, I'll be back another time and all of that with more stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing these days, but I'll figure it out. I've just
winging it.
I just tend to turn the camera on now and start talking, and whatever it comes out that's what I'm doing that day. That's how it works now. So I'll be back later. You all take care, and thank you, everybody. See you later.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.